In this video, we are going to build a mobile application called Missing Photo app. And this is used to search for images of your choice. Before we get into code, let's look at the demo for this project. I have opened the project using Android and iOS simulators. Before we get into code, let's look at the final demo. Over here, I have image background which is being blurred and then text and a button on it. When I click on the start searching, we have the home page for searching of the images. By default, as soon as it loads, it is going to fetch images of cars, and we can customize this one to suit our need. And here we have the title of our project and then a search bar and then categories as that. And if I click on this icon here, I have bottom sheet drawer as we see on the screen with some filter options. And I can close it as that. And I can search an image by a category. For example, places. If I click on that, we have the activity indicator and we got the images. And look at the cool effect on the categories. If I press and hold, as you can see, this animation. And we are going to use the built-in animation that came with React Native. And also, I can search for an image. For example, if I say food, and indeed we got the food. And we can also perform some advanced filtering. For example, the image type, orientation, color, and the order. If I want illustration, and then vertical, and for the color, if I say this, and then the order, if I say latest, and then I'm gonna click on the apply filters. And indeed, we got what we want based on the filtering. So guys, this is what we are going to build. Let's look at the packages that we are going to use. We are going to use Expo for creating our application, and a package called mainstream list for displaying the images, and then bottom sheet, which is this one as we see when I click on the advanced filtering. And also, we're going to use an API from Pixabay. So before we continue, make sure to have an API key from Pixabay, and it is free of charge. If you go to pixabay.com/API and docs, or you can click on the Pixabay API documentation, and it will take you to this page. In here, let's look at the process involved. They have some rate limit. And that is number of requests that you can make within some duration. In here, we have 100 requests per minute. Let's look at the API endpoint, which is this one, and that is for searching. This is the base endpoint, and we can pass in some parameters. The first one is the key, which is required, and it is of type string. And before we can get the API key, unless we sign up or we log in. For me, I'm going to log in by clicking on this and log in with my Gmail account. I have my API key. Make sure to use your own API key, and we can build up our API endpoint by passing in these parameters. Q simply means query. This means that the user can perform some query, for example, finding images that belongs to car. And in here, it must be URL encoded. And then the language. These are the supported languages. And then the ID, image type, orientation, category, the mean width, mean height, colors, and others. We have used most of these parameters. As we see in the final project, we have these parameters as filters. Alright, with this one being said, let's get into code. Back to VS Code. Let me show you the extensions I'm using in case you may have interest with. In here, I'm using what is called Tenacious Design Theme, which is this one, and I'm using Codium AI for generating some of the codes that we are going to write to make our life much easier, and Code Spell Checker to avoid spelling mistakes as we move on. And we have Year 7 React Native snippet. This is going to help us to scaffold our React Native screens or pages or components. With this one being said, let's get into code. Let's visit expo.dev, and this is the first step for generating our React Native project. Copy that, and then back to VS Code. Let me close these guys, and then open the terminal and paste that. In here, if we hit enter, by default, it is going to configure Expo Router for us, but we want to start from scratch. Therefore, I'm going to provide a flag called template, and then hit enter, and enter again, and select blank, and then the project name. For me, I have named it as Image Finder, which is this folder. Therefore, I'm going to use period for this one and hit enter. The next step is that we are going to configure Expo Router. So click on the guides, and then under the Expo Router, click on the introduction. Let's look at the next step. We are going to install it manually. So click on that. And the first step is copy the snippet back to the project, paste it, and then hit enter. And Expo Router is going to help us to implement navigation pretty easily. So the next step is that we need to copy this snippet and back to our project. Let's locate package.json file, and we are going to replace with this one, because now we are using Expo Router. The next step is that we need to modify the app.json file by providing what is called scheme. So copy that, and then bring comma here, and let's locate the app.json, and I'm gonna place it over here and bring comma. I'm gonna rename this one to Messing. Alright, let's look at the next step, and that is it. So let's start our project and open the terminal, clear it, and make use of npx expo start. I'm going to use iOS simulator, so I'm gonna press I and A for Android. And it says that welcome to Expo. I'm going to preview the final one using this simulator, and this is going to help us to visualize what we are going to build. Alright, so we are going to focus on the home page, and this is how Expo Router works. It uses file-based routing similar to Nest.js. So in here, we are going to create a folder called app. The name must be app. And then inside, we are going to have the individual screens for our project. The first one is going to be the index.js. This is going to be the home page over here. Now I'm going to scaffold the components using this snippet, and I'm going to rename this one to welcome. The name of the file is really important, but the name of the component, you can name it whatever you want. Now this is going to be the home page, as you can see over here. But in here, we are going to specify the kind of navigation that we are going to use. Look here. If I click on the start section, I have what is called stack navigation. Therefore, we are going to use what is called stack navigation. So in the app folder, I'm going to have one file called _layout. The name must be _layout, otherwise it will not work. This is where we're going to specify our stack navigation. So let me bring in the stack from Expo Router. And I'm going to export the stack as that. Now if I save it, as you can see now, we have what is called stack navigation with this as index, and that is the main entry point for this project, and that is the home page. In this case, it has taken the name of the file as index. If I change this one to home, here will be home. Let me just do that to prove to you as home, and as you can see, we have it here as home. But let me make it more descriptive by using index. So now, if you want to customize this one, we are going to do it in the layout here. So to be able to perform some customization, we are going to export it as stack, and then inside we're gonna have the individual screens as stack.screen, and then inside we're gonna specify the name, and the name here I'm gonna use what is called welcome. If I save this one, let's see the kind of error. Let me reload, and it says that cannot find a route by name welcome. This means that the value for the name must match the file name as index. So in here, and that is the layout, is supposed to be index. Now if I want to change the name, I'm gonna provide what is called options, which is equal to this, and then if I say header shown is equal to false, let's see, we don't have the header and our text is up here. If I say true here, we're gonna have it as that, and I can change by using what is called title, and I will say welcome, and indeed we have welcome. But for the final one, we don't have the header, so I'm gonna change this one to false, and I can remove this one. So let's continue in the welcome screen. I'm gonna provide you with the complete CSS for the home screen. Definitely the final source code will be provided. Let's look at what we need. We will need what is called image as our background. Therefore, we are going to import what is called image background from React Native, and then style sheet also from React Native. And we are going to use Expo Blur. So let's search for Expo Blur, and let's go ahead and install that, copy, and then back to the project. I'm going to open a new instance and then paste that. Alright, it is done. So let me close it, and then let's bring in the blur view from Expo Blur, and then link from Expo Router for navigation. So in here, I'm gonna remove everything from here and use image background as that. And then inside, we're gonna specify these attributes or props for the image background. The first one is gonna be the source of the image, and then the style that we want to apply to the image, and remove the border radius. I'm gonna use my favorite image from Pixabay. Let's say I want this image. Right click and then click on the copy image address, and then I'm gonna replace with this one. Save it, and let's see what we have. And we have it as that. The next step is that we are going to add the blur effect. Therefore, in here, I'm going to bring in the blur view, and then I'm going to specify the intensity of the blur, and I'm going to use 100 and the style as blur container because we have the styles over here. Let me change this one to 50. And then in the blur, I'm going to provide a view as the text container. And then I'm going to close it here as that. And I'm going to have a text by saying that missing photo app, and provide the style as title, and then the subtitle as text. And I'm going to provide what is called welcome to Tech photo app. Click the button below to get started. You can change the text to suit your need. Alright, let's see what we have. And we have it as that. But for the final one, we have it as that. So let me replace with this. And the last step is the button here. When the user click on this, we want to navigate the user to a different page. So in the view here, I'm going to provide what is called pressable. So let's import it from React Native, and we're going to provide a style by using style.button, and inside we're going to use the link component from Expo Router, and that is when a user click on this, we are going to navigate the user to a path. So in here we're going to provide what is called href, and then the style are styles.link, and then I will say start searching. Alright, let's see what we have, and we have it as that. For some reasons the CSS is not being applying, so I'm going to, I have to wrap this one in a text as text, and then provide the style as style.button text, and we have it as that. Have you seen the blur background of the image? Now we are done with the home page. If I click on the start searching, we are going to design this page also. So when I click on this, we are going to open a stack navigator with this component. But for this one, it says that not found because we don't have any route with this path. So let's go ahead and add the folder or the path. In here, I'm going to use images, and then inside I'm going to have one file called .home.js. Now our path is going to be /images and then the home. So if I get back to the index here, and the path, it is going to be images /home. Now if I click on this one, as you can see, we don't have that one. It says that not found. So we are going to have what is called _layout, because we are going to customize the home page screen. So in here we have it as that. And let me scaffold the component as that. And let me provide the CSS. Let's bring in the style sheet, and then touchable opacity, and then image, and modal, and also activity indicator for displaying loading spinner, and text as well. Alright, and we will need what is called icons from vector icons. So I'm gonna import it as import /vector icons. What we want is called ionic icons. This is where we're gonna have all these components: the search bar, the categories, the filter here, and others. But let's move step by step. And you're going to have the following state. The first one is modal visible? By default, it is false. And then selected the category, and then the filters, and then the search result, and then the loading. I'm going to place my API key as Pixabay API key, and back to Pixabay, I'm gonna copy my API key, which is this one. I'm going to place it here. We are going to work on the search bar. In this case, this one. So I'm gonna have a component for it. So in the app folder here, I'm gonna have what is called component, or let me place it outside as component so that it won't regard it as a path. Let's begin with the search bar as search bar.js, and let me scaffold the component and the style as that, and you will need the ionic icons from vector icons, and then this state, and that is search term, and then the set search term. So I'm gonna have a function called handle search as const handle search is equal to arrow function, and then we are going to implement our logic here. So in here we are going to check in case we have the search term, and I'm gonna trim by using .trim. If it is equal to empty string, then we are going to return, meaning that we're not gonna call the API. And for this component, we're gonna pass in what is called event handler called onSearch, and we are going to pass it from the home screen. So in here we are going to call the onSearch term and then pass in our search term. Now let's build our UI. For the view, I'm gonna provide a style, and that is styles.container. And let's have the text input. We're going to have the style, and that is styles.input, and then the placeholder, and then the value, which is equal to the search term, and then the onChange handler. Remove this one and then pass in the set search term. Alright, and lastly, we're gonna have the touchable opacity, which is this one, and inside I'm gonna use the ionic icon by passing in the name of the icon as search, and the size as that, and then the color, and then the onPress, and remove the onPress here, and let's pass it here to the touchable opacity. Alright, so now we are done with the search. Last step is that we are going to use it in the home here, and that is in the app, images, and home. Let's import the search bar from our component folder, and in here I'm gonna place the search bar. And remember, we are going to pass in what is called the onSearch handler. At the moment, let's see the preview. Let me click on this, and we have on match route. Let me reload and click on that, and we see useState is not defined. Alright, so let's locate. Indeed, we don't have the useState here. So let's destructure and take useState. Click on that. useState is not defined on the search bar. Yeah, so let's locate the search bar. Indeed, we are using useState here. Click on that, and now we have the search bar here with the icon. Let me locate the home, and that is images and home. For the view, I'm gonna provide a style, which is equal to, I'm going to use flex of 1. And the last component is going to be the category list. So let me add the component as that, and then let me scaffold as that. For the category list, we are going to build up our own array of categories. If we get back to the documentation, let's see the category, and these are the categories: backgrounds, fashion, and I have copied everything and placed them in an array. So definitely I'll provide you with the final source code with the categories, or I can place it here. Alright, so we are going to loop through this one and display them accordingly. So for this component, we're going to pass in what is called onSelect category. And that is when a user click on the category, we are going to pick what the user has been selected. So this we're going to implement the animation. So bring in what is called animated. And then in the component here, it is equal to const animation, which is equal to use ref from React as use ref, and we are going to pass in new animated dot value dot current. I'm going to pass in 1 for this, and we are going to have the handle press in and then the handle press out. So when a user presses in, we are going to trigger the animation, likewise the pressing out. So here as const handle press in, which is equal to arrow function, and here I'm going to use what is called animated.spring and pass in the animation instance. The total value is equal to 0.95, and then the use native driver, which is equal to true, and then start function here. The next one is going to be handle press out, which is equal to this one. The difference here is the total value. Here is 1 and here is 0.95. And let's have the animated style as const animated style, which is equal to an object by specifying what is called transform and pass in scale and then the animation instance. Alright, so in here I'm gonna add the CSS. So I'm going to copy the styling, and then in the view here it is equal to style, which is equal to styles.container. And let's have the flat list for displaying the categories. So here as flat list, and we're gonna pass in these props as data, which is equal to the category array, which is this one. Then the key extractor, which is equal to item, and then we're going to use the individual item as a key extractor. And then the function to render the individual categories by passing in what is called a callback function, and in here we are destructuring the individual item. This is where I'm going to pass in what is called touchable opacity. When the user click on that, we are going to trigger the animation as on press in, which is equal to handle press in, and then on press out as handle press out. And then the style is going to be styles.item, and then the onPress function. For the onPress function, we are going to have as onSelected category. At the moment we don't have it. And for the callback for the onPress, we are going to call the onSelected category. We are going to pass in this function in the home screen. Don't worry, when we get there you better understand this one. And then the next step is the animation. It is going to be animated, and as that, we are going to pass in the following styles, which is equal to styles.animated, and then the animated style, which is this one, and then our custom CSS also here as that. I'm using an array simply because I want to apply multiple CSS to that. And lastly, I'm going to pass in the text, which is equal to the individual item, and pass in the style as that. And then if you look at the final one, we have it as horizontal. So in here for the flat list, we are going to pass in what is called horizontal. And then I'm going to use show horizontal scroll indicator by using false. Now I'm going to call this one in the home screen, and that is inside the images folder. Here I'm going to place in the category list, and let's see what we have, and we have it as that. Let me remove the title from the category list, remove this one, and we have it as that. Now when I click on this one, as you can see the cool effect, and it says that unselected is not a function, simply because we are not passing in the function upon calling it inside the home here. So this means that we're gonna have the individual event handlers. So let's continue. So let me close these guys, and let me locate the home here. Remember, this one requires us to pass in an event handler called unselected category, because we are destructuring it inside this component. Therefore, I'm going to assign to this function as handle selected category. At the moment it doesn't exist, so let's go ahead and then create that, which is equal to handle selected category, and we're going to pass in the selected category and pass in the category name, and here remove this one. Alright, now if I save it, click on this and click on that, as you can see now we don't have any error. It is time for us to build up our API, and that is when the user click on any of this one, we are going to trigger the API call for searching. This is where handle search comes in. So here I will say handle search, which is equal to const handle search, which is equal to a sync function, because we are going to talk to external API, and in here we're going to pass in, for this one I'm going to use Axios, therefore I have to install as npm I Axios to make our HTTP request. So in here I'm going to bring in try and catch block. For this, you can use query for making the asynchronous request. So as soon as the user click on the handle search, we are going to say that loading is equal to true. Alright, so in here I'm going to assign the response from the API as response, and use await and then Axios. Let me check the import. Yeah, we have the auto import. I'm going to use .get and pass in the backtick, and then the endpoint is going to be, let me locate the endpoint, which is this one. Copy that and then place it here as backtick. And the next one is going to be the API key. So bring question mark and then the key, which is equal to our Pixabay API key, which is this one. You can secure this API key. Now I'm going to append other parameters, and that is other queries. by using what is called the AND operator and then the search term. The search term must be URL encoded. Therefore, I'm going to pass this one to encoded URL and pass in our search term. And in here, I'm going to specify another parameter by using AND and then the image type, it is equal to the following. Instead of hard coding, I'm going to provide what is called the filters. Remember, we have the filters here as filters.imageType.orientation.color and then .order. So let's make it more dynamic by removing this one, and here I'm going to use $sign by using filters.imageType. And let me accept the autocomplete, and that is appending other parameters as image type by using filters.imageType and then the orientation as filters.orientation, color is equal to filters.color, and then order as filters.order. And we can pass in the pagination by using what is called AND, and then the page, it is equal to 1. We want to display only the first page by having 100 images. Alright, so the next step is that is after this one, we are going to set the search result. And here we have the response on what is called response.data.hit. And we are updating our state as set search result. And that is it. So in here for the catch block, in case something goes wrong, I'm going to log it and I'm going to add what is called finally block here, and I will say loading is equal to false. So last step is that we are going to pass to the search bar component. Remember, the search bar component takes in what is called on search handler. So in here, I'm going to pass in the handle search, supposed to be on search, and which is equal to the handle search as that. Now, if I log the result as log the response.data.hit, let me reload, open the terminal, and then reload. Let me try out, and if I say food search, and we have the result from the API as we see on the screen. So we are going to display this one as we see in the final one. But before that, let's add the icon here for the bottom sheet. So let me close this, and in the home component here, after the category list, I'm going to pass in what is called view component. I'm going to customize the component by using stack.screen. And let me make sure that I have the auto import from the Expo Router. So in here, I'm going to specify the options. For these options, I'm going to use image as the icon here, which is this one over here. So I'm going to use what is called header right, and it's going to be a function by passing in what is called touchable opacity. And then when the user click on that, we are going to trigger what is called onPress by having a function called handle open modal. At the moment we don't have it, so let's leave it as it is. And we are going to use what is called ionic icons by using the icon name as such. But for this one, I'm going to change to use what is called filter outline, and let's see what we have. And this is what we have. When a user click on this, we are going to open a modal. and that modal we are going to inject the bottom sheet, as we can see in the final one. Before that, let's display the actual image, and we are going to use the mainstream package for that. Before that, let's check for loading. As loading, then we're going to use the activity indicator, and I'm going to pass in the color as red, and then the size, and this is where we're going to display the images, and we're going to use this package as mainstream. So if you go to the npm package, copy that back to our project. Let me open this and then paste that. Alright, it is done. So let's get into the home here, and I'm going to import as that. So let's scroll down here, which is this. We are going to use the mainstream list, and we're going to pass in the following. The first one is going to be the data, and the data is from the search result, and then the key extractor, which is that I'm going to use the ID of the individual image, and then the number of columns. I'm going to use 2 for this one, and then show vertical scroll indicator. For this one, I'm going to use false for this, and then the render item, so as that, and then in here I'm going to use view, and then for the view I'm going to pass in the style as image container, and then the actual image using the image component by providing the source of the image as item.webformatted URL. If you console log the response from the API, you're going to see the URL of the image as web format URL. And then lastly, let me provide the style as image.style. And lastly, I'm going to provide what is called on end rate threshold. I'm going to use 0.1. With this one, save it, and let's see. If I search, for example, food, and search, we have the loading, and this is what we have. Next step is that when I click on any of these categories, I want to fetch the images by that category, but at the moment it is not working. The issue here is that when a user click on the category component, in this case this one, we are passing in the handle select category, which is this function. So in here, when a user click on that, we are going to call the handle search by passing in the category. With this one, save it, and let's see. If I click on animals, and indeed we got the animals. The next step is that we are going to work on the modal. When I click on this one as compared to the final one, if I click on this, we have the modal with the bottom sheet navigation with the filter options. Let's look at the logic behind this one. First step is that we are going to install a package called bottom sheet to have something like this. But to have this feature, we are going to wrap it inside what is called a modal. So first, we are going to install the package, and then we are going to pass in all these filter options, and lastly, we are going to call this one by using what is called a modal. Because of that, we are going to create a component for this one. But let's move step by step. So copy the snippet and then back to the terminal. Let me open new instance and then paste that. Alright, it is done. So let's continue with the home screen. In this case, the one which is inside the images. So here, after the menstrual list, I'm gonna place in the Modal component as Modal from React Native. And this is where we are gonna call the bottom sheet. But before that, let's pass in a couple of props to the Modal. The first one is going to be the animation type. For this one, I'm going to use slide. And then transparent, I'm going to use true. And lastly, I'm going to pass in what is called the visibility. And that is when a user click on the icon here, we are going to call or display the Modal. Therefore, we have to manage the global state. So let's locate our state, and we have the is Modal visible and then set Modal visible. So let's get into the Modal here by passing in the visible by using what is called is Modal visible. And in here, I'm just going to display some text, and I will say bottom sheet. So how can we trigger this Modal? We are going to locate this icon, and the icon can be found over here, and that is in the header right here. I'm gonna pass in what is called on press to the touchable opacity by saying on press. And we're gonna pass in the handle Modal open. At the moment, we don't have the function for opening the Modal, so let's just do that. So in here, I will say const handle Modal, and I'm gonna use what is called set Modal visible by using what is called true over here. So let me use true instead. And lastly, for the closing of the Modal, which is equal to the opposite way, and that is false. So we are going to call this one over here as handle Modal. Alright, with this one, let's try out. If I click on this one, as you can see, we have the Modal being opening with the bottom sheet text. So instead of this one, we are going to display the bottom sheet like this. So let's go ahead and then create the component. I'm gonna name it as filter sheet. And let's scaffold the screen as that. And let's import the bottom sheet from the package that we installed. Let's look at the final one. We are going to pass in the following filter options: image type, orientation, color, and then the order. So we are going to mimic from the official documentation. In here, we have the image type, which are all photo, illustration, and vector. And we have the orientations and then the colors. So we are going to copy these values by ourselves, and I have already prepared them as following: the image types as an array, orientations, and then the colors, and lastly the orders. So we are going to pass the following when a user is making the search. So I'm gonna have a specific component called filter option. So in here, I will say const filter option, which is equal to array function. And for this one, I'm gonna pass in the following. The first one is going to be the label, and then the options, and then the selected option, and then a function called onSelect. Don't worry, when we get to the usage, you better understand this one. I'm going to provide the CSS for it. I'm going to provide the CSS as styles.content container. Well, it's supposed to be in the filter option instead. So in here, I'm going to return the JSX with a view, and for the wrapper here, I'm going to pass in the content container CSS, and also I'm going to provide a text, but for this text, I'm going to use the label as a value by using style.label, and I'm going to pass in what is called scroll view and wrap it as that, because we're going to have something like this. As you can see, I can scroll from left to right, and then the content are also moving from left to right as that. So in here, for the scroll view, I'm going to pass in what is called horizontal to have those effects, and then show horizontal scroll. For this one, I'm going to say false, and this is where we're going to look through the actual options. So in here, I will say options.map, and then I'm going to use touchable opacity here, and then in between I'm going to provide a text, and the text here is going to be the actual option by passing in the style as styles.option text. So let's provide a key for this one as key, which is equal to the option, and then the style I'm going to pass in as an array of CSS, and lastly the event handler as onPress. Alright, so let's see what is going on over here. And like I said, that if you want to apply multiple CSS to an element, we're going to use an array. And for this one, it simply means that in case a user has selected an option, we're going to apply this CSS to it. Alright, and that is it for the filter option. The next step is that we are going to call this one in the following component, and that is the filter sheet. So for this component, we're going to pass in the following. The first one is the ability to close the sheet as close sheet, and then apply filters. In here, we're going to have some internal state here, and let me paste that. We're going to use ref and then use memo by passing in these values, and we have the selected type image, and then the orientation, the color, and then the order. After this one, I'm going to have a function called handle apply filters as const, and this is where we're going to call the function called apply filters. Don't worry, upon calling this component, you're going to see the actual function being passed in. So in here, I will say apply filters and as a function, and then the object. And it goes like this: image type by using the selected type, orientation as that, color, and then the order. And lastly, we are going to call the close sheet. Alright, so last step is that we are going to use the bottom sheet as that. Remember, we have already imported from the package as that. So this is where we're going to pass in what is called the ref, and the ref is equal to the sheet ref by passing in the index. For this one supposed to be 1 but not 0, and then the snap point by using what is called snap point. Remember, we have it from the use memo here. And after that, let me remove this one by passing in what is called view. And for the view, I'm going to use the style as styles.content container, and then the actual text, which is equal to styles.title, and then I will say filter options. And this is where we're going to call the component, and that is the filter option by passing in the following. So the first one is going to be the image type. So in here, I will say filter option by passing in the following as label, and for this I'm going to use image type. Let me remove the object, and then the options, I'm going to use image type and then the selected option, and then the unselect. So I'm gonna accept the autocomplete as that. And let's see what is going on over here. Each of these one represent a particular option. The first one is going to be the image type. As we spoke about in the official documentation, we have the image type, and each of these one correspond to a component based on the application need by passing in the options, in this case the image types. If you check up here, we have it as an array. So we're gonna have 4 of them, and that is one for image type, orientation, colors, and others. So that is what we are doing over here by passing in the following. The next one going to be the orientation, the color, and then the order. But for the color, the way we are calling the onSelect here, I'm going to use arrow function by saying color, and I'm going to make a condition inside here. So I will say that in case we have the value, then use what is called any. So this means that in case the value is equal to any, use empty, otherwise use the actual value, which is this one, supposed to be value here or color. Alright, so last step is that we're gonna pass in the button as button, and then I'm gonna pass in the title as apply filters, and on press I'm gonna call the handle apply filters. So last step is that we are going to call this component called filter option inside the home screen here. Remember, we added a comment here. So now it's time for us to use it. I'm gonna change this one to view and use a class or CSS as styles.modal overlay, and then remove this one also. And in here I'm gonna pass in the component as filter options, supposed to be filter sheet. Let me resave. Now it is working for the auto import. Remember, for this function I'm gonna pass in what is called the close sheet, and here I'm gonna pass in the close modal, and lastly the apply filters, and in here I'm gonna pass in what is called the handle apply filters. At the moment we don't have it, so let's just go ahead and then add that. So in here I will say const handle apply filters, which is equal to that. For this one I'm going to use callback to avoid unnecessary rendering. So instead of this one I'm going to pass in what is called use callback as use callback, which is a hook from React. So let me import it from here as use callback, and which is equal to that, and then pass in the callback function, and that is our function. In here I'm gonna pass in what is called filters by calling set filters, and then pass in the new filters, and as a second argument I'm gonna pass in an empty array. Now let's go ahead and then call the function here. So remove this one, and then I will say handle apply filters, save it, and moment of truth. Let me reload the application, and for some reasons it says that reanimated failed to create the worklet. This simply means that the package called bottom sheet requires what is called React Native gesture. So if you search the React Native gesture, go ahead and then install that, and Expo has it already. So if you search for gesture Expo, it will take you to this official documentation. Copy that and then back to our project, paste that, and then install. So we are going to wrap it inside our layout. Remember, for this layout, we have empty code. This is where we're going to customize our component. So in here, I'm going to bring in the gesture handle root view and then the stack navigator from Expo. So now I'm going to export as root by passing in what is called gesture handle root view by passing in our stack. With this one, save it and let me reload the application. Well, for some reasons, we still have it as before. So let's change the way we are installing the package. So if you go to the official documentation, click on the Get Started. And then click on the installation. And in here, we are going to install either to use yarn or npm. So I'm going to use npm for that. Copy and then back to the project. Shut down and paste that and install. Let me rerun the application. Alright, let me reload. Alright, so let's try out. And if I say food and you got the results, if I click on this one, we have what is called useRef is not defined. So let's locate the filter sheet and let's import useRef and reload. Let's try again. Click on this and use memo also not defined. Alright, so let's try again and click on that. Use state is not defined. Let's check what we may need. Alright, use ref and yeah, that is it. So I think we'll be good to go. Search and click on that, and touchable opacity is not also defined. Sorry, on my side. Now if I click on the start searching and if I click on this, as you can see, we have the options. If I say I want illustration and then apply filters, and indeed we got the illustration for that. Alright, so here ends this project. In case you found this video useful, don't forget to subscribe, share and comment. Catch you up in my next project.